So this is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're taking a little tour of our bedroom studio. And what we're going to show you here is our latest acquisition, which is our Grandmother from Moog. And you'll see this is a awesome semi-modular synth, kind of like a mini Moog, except you'll see all these modular patch points. And right now, we've got a lot of cool things going on. One of the coolest things we have going on with this machine is we actually have the sample and hold circuit, which is kind of like a R2600. We've got that going into our mixer right now, and we're having to come into one of our oscillators. But also what's cool about this synth is you can actually have a high pass filter and the ladder filter on at the same time, so we have them running in series. We also have our main output from our mixer going into the actual spring reverb, and that creates a really interesting tone. We'll do a later video which actually sound. We'll just turn this thing on. You get to see the really cool Jolly Rancher type buttons when you press them. They're very satisfying. You can see they kind of light up. What we also have here in our studio is our Arturia Minibrute 2S. And the cool thing we have about this is we have it linked to a Rack Brute Eurorack system. And in our Eurorack, you'll see we've got a Mother 32 in here. And so that was our first Moog that we ever got. So we actually took it out of its case and put it into the 6U. We've also got what's really cool in this Eurorack is this cool module. If you have a Eurorack, what's really nice, Lifeforms makes this 2x2 mixer, which allows us to take in the VCA signals all over the Eurorack, and then we have them outputted right from the Eurorack into the master on the Minibrute 2S. What this allows us to do is like play with the levels of each of these modules. So you'll see we have the Mother 32. And then we've got a Morphagene, which is a Eurorack sampler from Make Noise, which is awesome. We use this to sample our own stuff. Then we've got the Math Utility module, which we're using to great effect. You see we got it wired up pretty heavy. And then we've got one of the best Moogs ever to come out is the Moog DFAM. And we're using a patch called the kick, bass, and snare. We got it heavily modified. As you see, we have a lot of patch points, a lot of things going into the math module, which can do its own LFOs. It can do logarithmic and exponential processing of the signal. It's got, a lot of summing. It's got descending, and what we also have is it's on this level 4, sync 4. You can do crescendo, decrescendos that are pretty interesting. The Minibrute 2S. What's cool about it is you'll see the sequencer them pressing the buttons on, that you can actually drive awesome sequencing, and you can do it on a pretty cool level. You can do it on the pitch, you can do it on the gate, you can do it on the velocity, and you have ability to do it on mods. And you've got a pretty extensive patch bay that you can use. And what we also like about the Minibrute 2S that's pretty cool is it's kind of like an R2600. It's got sliders. And we've never had this kind of system on our modules. It actually has an oscillator mixer. It allows you to take the waves and have different levels of the waves. And so that makes it very interesting when you create sounds. Is that I've never had a synthesizer have that kind of capability. You see on the Moogs, it's all dials. So it doesn't have that. And even on the Grandmother, it's all dials, but it's a different type of capability. But we love the keypad on this Moog. It's very cool, and the modulation wheel is very awesome because when you push it up, you can control FM synthesis if you've got that patched up. You can do a lot of cool things with the modulation. If you can actually have this modulation section has the ability to be a third oscillator. And so if you patch this from the actual output wave out and you bring it into the noise in, you can actually control it as a third oscillator, which we've done, but we tend to use the modulation. We like using the FM modulation and doing a lot of cool things with it. And the sequencer on this is very cool. It's very simple. You just take it and you set it to record, and then you just play something, and then you put it back to sequence, and when you put it back to sequence, it'll play up to 256 notes. We like to actually wire this up, but we'll take the advanced clock out of the DFAM. You can take the advanced clock out of the DFAM and put it into the gate in. That's me. Let me switch it back. That's you don't want to see me right now. You put it into the gate in of the actual grandmother, and then you can control your DFAM signal a lot more, and that allows you to make a very extended analog drum patterns. One of the cool things about the DFAM, it's maybe a limitation, if you look at it, there's no MIDI on this machine. So to make drum beats, you have to go into this live row here, and you've got the different pitches that set the tone of your drum. And so you set these pitches, and it makes the actual beat. And then the velocity controls like the loudness of the beat and the speed of the beat. And then you've got the ability to have these two oscillators. And what's cool is the hard sync. The hard sync allows you that if you turn up the oscillator that's being synced, like you take the velocity of oscillator 1, you turn it all the way up. And then when you have the hard sync on, it will drive this hard sync and make all kinds of really cool dissonance and really interesting tones. This machine, because of its limitations, or maybe lack of limitations, because once you go into the patch bay, you can do all kinds of cool things. But it drives you to what we do when we record, is we'll live record, and we'll go to our full solution in our studio. You'll see we have here our main board. We've got from 2008 a Roland Juno Gi, and it's our main synthesizer. We've got this connected by MIDI, and it actually can control the Moog Mother 32. And we actually can do is we got a 61 key bed that we're actually able to run our analog Moog tone off of it. So if we go into our Juno, we can hit the MIDI control, and when we're on MIDI control, we actually control our Mother 32. And so that allows us to have a 61 key bed control on a full analog synth. So then we have this being, the Juno can be running the Mother 32, and then the Grandmother is a full analog keyboard in itself. So that's one cool technique we do. If we want to do pianos and other things, we use the Juno for doing our key grand and things like that. But the Juno's got like 1,300 sounds. So this is our main polyphonic key bed. We do all kinds of synth patches. It does all kinds of classic polyphonic. It does leads. It does all kinds of stuff. It's got lots of, like I said, 1,300 sounds. And we do a lot of cool stuff with it. We got, awesome level. We use a lot of the tones that we use. Like it even has like a D50 from a Roland D50. It's got a D50 tone in here. It's got a lot of cool stuff. It's all PCM stuff. And what's cool, it's got the ability to do a sound modify here that allows you to do some interesting stuff with the cutoff and the reverb. It's not as extensive as like a Jupiter X, or it doesn't have that full keyboard. You got to dive into a lot of things to get this thing to work. But it does have the ability to do interesting partials. So most of the sounds are actually partials. And so if you hit the live set, you'll see that a lot of the sounds that are actually built into a sound are partials. And the partials end up being parts of a set. And you can control what those parts are, which is pretty cool. Then if you want to know how we create Josephine Electric, Josephine Electric is actually created by using this little box called the Voice Transformer VT4. And we use this to create Josephine's voice, because they have it hooked up to our studio electronics microphone with our Shield. And we've got that hooked up, and that's when we do our vocal tracks. That's how we do Josephine. You see me there. So our primary sequencer is our Arturia BeatStep Pro, which allows you to do multiple lines of sequencing. We'll actually turn it on because it's not on. I gotta plug it in to our MX1 performance mixer, which is our kind of, get this on. So you see it booting up. What's cool about this machine is it has the ability to do 3 lines of sequencing. So we have a drum sequencer, and then we have another sequencer 2 and sequencer 1. The drum sequencer is hooked up to our Roland JDXI. And the cool thing about the JDXI is the JDXI inside of it is built in tons of Roland drum machines. So if you go into the JDXI and we go and look at the drum machines, it's got, you know, a 909, it's got 808. So if we go through the different tones, you see I got an 808 kit, I got a 909, I got 727, 707, I got CR78, 606, 626, I got EDM kit, I got drum bass kit, techno kit, house kit. So a long time ago, since 2016, we've been using the BeatStep Pro, which cool thing about the BeatStep Pro, if you look at it, it can do up to 64 steps and chain patterns. So we use this to actually create our drum patterns with these pads. And you can create up to 64 steps and then chain them together. And then when you chain them together, you can build a song. And then you have also the ability to do like randomness and probability. So that gives us, when we're playing live, it gives us, it makes it sound like there's a real drummer, because it will go off and just do random stuff and different probabilities of random things. And you can do like a shuffle. We got like a 50% right now. You can do randomness. You can control the level of the randomness or what you're gonna do. You can control the BPM. Okay, 126 right now. Usually we do like 120. That's 115. But the cool thing about the JDXI is it's an analog hybrid digital synth. So this has got supernatural sounds from Roland, and we've got it linked up to the sequencer on sequence 2, so we can bring in supernatural sounds and analog sounds off of this JDXI. It just gives us more color when we're performing, and like I said, this is our full live setup, and you can see the full picture of our live home studio. It's the full machine, full setup. So next we'll go from the VT4 down to one of our favorite Roland devices, which is the System 1M. System 1M is an analog behavioral modeling synthesizer. And what's cool about this synthesizer, it's a fully digital synthesizer, but you see it actually has controlled voltage. And what's cool about this synth is kind of like the way, what we like about the Arturia is for its pitch modulation section, for the filter and the amp, it has sliders. And the sliders really let you know where you are, and you can see it even has an attack, decay, sustain, release diagram. So when you're actually modeling your attack and sustain, you can actually see the slope and the position of your waves. What's cool about this machine is it can model classic Rolands. They can do a System 100, it can do a SH101, they can do all kinds of things. And we love it about it. It has a very awesome ambient sound. It has the ability to do analog heavily and loud sounds, and it can do like a sub capability. I'm not saying it right, but what's cool, if you look at it here, it's got a sub oscillator, so it can actually do sub oscillation. And when you want really deep kind of techno EDM basses, this knob here gives you a lot of power. You get very, very booming bass. And it's digital, but this is an analog modeling synth, so it sounds analog. And then what's cool about it, unlike most analog synths, you can actually save patches. You see it's got a write button. So unlike our modes, we can actually save a patch here. When we create a patch, it will remember all the positions on all the surface controls. We control this synth through the Arturia. We actually have it coming off of sequencer 1. So sequencer 1 runs the System 1M. You can see it's the Roland System on them. You got the label here. It's a plug out. It's prior to the System 8 synth. It's a very capable synth. It can do 4 notes of polyphony if you have it set up to do that. You can see you can do polyphony button is right here. So you can have it do like mono or 4-note polyphony, which is pretty good for an analog synth. Now, one of our central recording tools is the MX1 Performance Mixer. The MX1 Performance Mixer is pretty cool because what we have it doing, we have our hardware synths coming in to this from the back, and it's got a lot of capabilities. This mixer, what's cool about it is it can take USB. So it's taking USB audio from our Juno, USB audio from our VT4 vocal transformer. It's taking USB audio from the JDXI, and it's taking USB audio from our BeatStep Pro. So that can all come into this mixer, and you can see it's got multiple lines. You can see it's got the USB lines, up to 4 USB lines coming in that we can apply effects to. And we can play also these awesome beat effects, which we'll talk about in a second. But so this mixer allows us to have all of our signals in terms of the volume and the level handled before we hit our recording solution. So when we like to do live stream of consciousness recording. And so when we do that level of recording, it's pretty cool that we're able to control the level of the sounds before we hit our recording solution. The other thing that's cool is it has a lot of different effects. If you look at it, you have the ability to do a delay, a flanger, different types of filters. There's 8 type of delays, there's 8 type of flangers, 8 filters, 8 bit crushes, 8 scatters, 8 rolls. You can also even do combinations of them. And then, unlike any other mixer I've ever seen, it actually has a sequencer. If you see here, it's got all these buttons here. These are a 16-step sequencer for your mixer. And it's got a start button. And if you see it starting, it's actually doing different effects you can apply. Each one of these effects can be applied to a step. So you could put a delay on step 1. You could put a filter on step 11. You can put a scatter on different steps, and what's cool about this is a performance mixer, so you can do this in real time. And it's got this little, and so in the jog wheel, you can control the level, like a filter, if it's high or low, of any of the effects that you're applying. And then it has different, beat effects that can be run off the filter. You can do sidechain compression. You can do a slicer. So what this does is allows you to control, the gain of your mix, the pan on your mix, auxiliary, the beat effects. It has a fader, and it has a scene memory, so you can set scenes and then save them. So if you're doing live shows, you can have all this stuff set. So you have all your mix set in real time when you're playing live. You could go and suddenly do a roll, which will do a big crescendo to a stop on your mix. You could go and run it through a bit crush. You can do different digital delays. You can do all kinds of stuff. And if you notice, when we record as the Ghost, we use this a lot. The other thing we do is we don't use a DAW. We use this Zoom R24. And the Zoom R24 takes in the output from our MX1 and brings it in to an input channel. Right now, you see we're on channels 3 and 4 because we had just recorded a track. And it's recording, right? It's still recording. We're recording this episode. It was recording. And what happens, we'll do an initial track with this thing. So we'll take these lines, come from the MX1. We'll pop them in to line 1 and line 2. That gives us a stereo signal. What's also cool about this is when we bring our monophonic synths into these lines, when it comes out of this mixer, it comes out of these 2 lines, which ends up taking a monophonic signal, and through analog cabling, we turn a monophonic signal into a stereo signal. That stereo signal is then brought into our R24 through lines 1 or 2, or 3 or 4, or 5 or 6, or 7 and 8. This thing then, if you look at it, you can see it's got a button for 1 through 8, and 9 through 16, 7 through 24. So it has 24 tracks. So when you go back after you used all 8 here, when you switch this button to 9 through 16, when you put these 2 lines back into 1 and 2, it's now 9 and 10. So it allows you to do up to 24 tracks. And what that does is we can then put down a mix, right, of a bunch of our our hardware synths. And what we might do in a mix is we might have the Roland Juno, we might have our Mother 32, might have our DFAM, might have our Grandmother coming in. But as I said, on our Eurorack, we also have this mixer. So this mixer allows us to have all the VCA signals from our Eurorack at different levels. So all this leveling from all this Eurorack stuff is leveled here at this mixer, and then goes into this device, the Arturia Minibrutes 2S, coming through this here, going into the master, and then it comes out of a 1/4 inch here. That 1/4 inch line then comes in to the MX1 Performance mixer. Then I can apply effects to it. I can do all kinds of stuff. And then when it comes out, it came in monophonic, but now it's coming out stereo. And stereo coming in here. So now we have a stereo signal. You might have maybe 5 or 6 instruments coming in at different levels, because all the levels were controlled here. So then we've got a wave file that creates off of these 2 tracks that gets created on this hard disk. Not a hard disk, it uses SD cards. So there's an SD card thing right here. You see there's an SD card in there. And so when we record, we put this on record, and you see the record button, it will record all of our hardware synths. And then once we have that mix, we can control like the BPM, we can control all kinds of things. We can go in here and we could add repeats. We can go and punch in. We can do a lot of interesting things on this device. Plus, this device has the ability to do all kinds of effects. So you can do like an algorithm, different mastering algorithms. You can do bass algorithm, acoustic, distortion, all different types of things. You can do compression, stereo mixes, and then it allows you to have all these different preset capabilities, like lo-fi, doubling, specific famous mixing systems, like a C414, a U887S, a lot of different things, MD42, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. So it's kind of like a DAW in that way. We can do all kinds of different profiles. But what we do then is we want to do tracks, 3 and 4. We just take our lines and we pop them in here, kind of like our CV control. It's not that different than what we do with our CV lines. We take our CV lines and we take them and we pop them into our module. So when we record, and we've got these physical wires we can pop into the mixer. And now if we arm this, we just armed it. Now we're recording on tracks 3 and 4. And disarm it. So what that allows us to do is we have that mix, and then we take our SD card out, and now we've got an SD card that we can bring over to our computer and then bring it into our computer, and we've got everything here, 24-bit audio, 48 megahertz. Now we're thinking of there's a new Zoom called an L20. They can do 98 megahertz. And what the difference in that Zoom is, we could have all these lines input into the L20. The L20 has like 20 tracks instead of 24. But each track records onto its own tracking system. What that means is here I have to physically take these lines and move them to, tracks 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have to keep on moving them around. But if I just wire this up, and instead of having everything on track 1 and 2, it will go and separate on an L20 all the tracks I did off of here. So if I had a Moog Mother 32 track coming in, right now and I had a DFAM track coming in, and I have an Arturia Minibrute 2S track and a Moog Grandmother coming in, it's all going to go on to track 1, but I leveled it out and it's all going on track 1 and 2. On the Zoom L20, it will go and take all those tracks and make them have their own track. So then when I go into the master, I've got a surface here and I can control the levels on the mastering feature because you can master on here. But here you have to do it sequentially. There you can do it all at once. So you could have everything coming out with a different mix, different levels, different effects, because you can go and change it after you record it. Or you could set it for each track coming in has a different mix. You know, some tracks could be going on a digital delay, some tracks could be going. Right now, everything comes in here is going to be on one type of thing, one type of compression, one type of setting. So when you do the overdub, you can make it different. So that's a limitation there, but this is just the introduction to our studio. This is how we record. And we've been recording like this since 2016. And we've been on 2 record labels, Bentley Records and Mojo Head Records. We're going to get on a Swedish record label called PR label out of Sweden. We are on Repost by SoundCloud that distributes all of our work right now. And so this has worked for us for a long time. And we just got a new booking agent through Kanga in Space, who's our booking agent, who's going to allow us to do live shows from our home studio, which we've done. This is when we do our live show, we do it right from here, and also go on the road. So we're pretty excited to show everybody our setup. The next video we're going to do is we'll actually show you what we're doing when we patch up the Grandmother. And like I said, the Grandmother is our latest acquisition, and this thing is just, for all those that love Moog, this Moog is our favorite Moog right now, just because it's beautiful, or maybe it's not beautiful to you, but for us it is, because it feels like a 1970s Moog. It just really feels like it. Oh no, we're maybe bringing in too much signal. But it feels like a 1970s Moog, because it is. It's a lot of these modules, they actually even come from the 1960s. Like a lot of this capability, like the spring reverb comes off of like model 55 Moog that costs like $30,000. The CP3 mixer, which you see right here. The ability of the CP3 is just incredible. This thing basically does it overboost the signal. So when you take the oscillator and you push it all the way to the right, this thing just creates like amazing kind of fuzz tone that you could only get off of model 11, model 33 and 55, and those modes cost like $30,000-$40,000. This mode only costs $900. So you're getting a module from the 60s that had this classic sound. If you listen to bands like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, you get to do what they did. And also, this is a real spring reverb. This isn't a digital spring reverb. There's a real spring in here. And so this thing is really awesome. And the fact, unlike the Mini Moog, this is semi-modular. So what you see is all these patch points, which it gives you the capabilities that the System 55 and the 33s had. And these are like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 Moogs. That now you don't just have all the dials and the surface controls, which you do have. And you can run this Moog without patching anything. You can just run it without doing it like a Mini Moog. But once you patch it, you get unlimited capability for creating sound. And then the other thing you can do is, because it's semi-modular, you could take, like a signal from one of our things here. So if we take a signal coming off of this synth, we can plug it into this synth. So now we've got a DFAM talking to the Grandmother. We could have our Arturia Minibrute 2S talking to the Grandmother. We're gonna have the Grandmother talking to the DFAM. And so you have all this cross capability. One cool thing that we've been doing is we can actually take this Morphagene, right? And you can take like the CV out of the Morphagene, right? And the cool thing about the Morphagene is it's kind of color coded. It runs samples based on color, not based on any other kind of indicator. And the colors mean different things. Like when it gets green, that means it's closer to the original speed of the track that you sampled. But this is when it's really, really slow, but it's green. And so it's kind of interesting. That was the original speed that you ran it at, but now it's running very slow. And if you run it over here, this is actually the true speed of the original sample, what you did. And it's color controlled, which for like an analog synthesis, that's what's cool about these type of synths. You get a lot of, visual feedback that's different than looking at a computer. And so everything's more based on dials and feels and positions, so you can feel. So this sampler, it does gene size, it does morphing, which will take a signal and move parts of that sample from the beginning to the end to the middle all over the place. It will actually slide the sample and collide it around. You can organize the sample, and you can do all kinds of interesting splices and speeds of the slices, and then the speed is controlled by this color knob, and then the level of the sample, and then you can create a stereo mix, or you can have mono mix. The other cool thing about it is that you can, run different clocks on it. And then you can have the clocks actually, I could use the DFAM tempo to run the speed of this sample. I could use the Mother 32 tempo to run this. I could take this sample. One of the things we do now is we take a sample that we did, right? And we run the CV out. And then we have that CV out actually control the tempo or velocity of our drum machine, which is the DFAM. So then we could have a sample off of the Morphagene running the velocity of our DFAM. So the kick, bass, and the snare actually have the rhythm of a sample that we did. And that's what's the cool thing about Eurorack. You can just kind of do whatever you want. You look at the extensiveness of these patch bass. You have all this control. Excuse the dust, I gotta clean it. But you can control so many different things. And we've got on our Eurorack, we got all these multipliers, which allow us to. The cool thing about a mult is like, okay, so you got this sample, right? A sample's coming out of this sampler, right? We put it into this mult. Now we could take this signal and we could have this signal actually go to multiple places. So we take this mult and we had the sample signal. Now we can take the sample signal and then run it into our actual Mother 32. But also we could take another wire and we could have that same sample running into the DFAM. So it allows you to multiply your signals. So we've got this big mult section of our Eurorack that we add this module for make noise. And it allows us to have all these mults. So we can replicate signals and send them all over the place. And that's one of the cool things is like this gives us a total sonic playground in how we do our construction of our songs. That's why we call ourselves expansive sound experiments. Because if you look at our rigs, it looks kind of like, like a mad scientist thing. And the wires get maybe confusing. But all these wires have purposes. All these outputs and inputs have different capabilities. If you look at the DFAM, you can see what all these things are. You see, the velocity, the VCA decay, the EG. So you've got all this capability in these synths. And it started with this Mother 32 when Moog kind of brought back the idea of doing semi-modular stuff. The cool thing about the Mother is it's got a digital, why it's called a Mother 32 is it's actually got a sequencer. And this is actually a keyboard. So this keyboard is also the sequencer. And you can do a 32-step sequence on this thing. And you can play the notes like a little keyboard. But we have MIDI. Now, MIDI allows us to take this Mother 32 like we talked about, and we route it into our Juno. So then what that does is it extends our monophonic Mother 32 and creates a 61 key little mini Moog, which if you look at this Moog, the Grandmother, we love it, but it doesn't have a 61 key bed. It doesn't, we can only play this many octaves on it. But so when we want to, now we can solve that by running MIDI out of this and bring it to our Juno. And then we've got a 61 key bed that we can actually, extend. But we've been able to extend the Mother 32 to the Juno. And then what that does is that gives us the ability to do a lot longer, a wider octave range on our analog synthesis. And that's pretty cool, but the MIDI standard allows you to do cool stuff like that. But again, on the Mother 32, what's incredible about this machine, it only has one oscillator. But this thing sounds as deep as this 3 oscillator Moog. And that's always surprises me, to this day. That sometimes on a song, I'll be doing bass lines on the Grandmother. But I'll do leads and pad-like things with the Mother 32, and it's only one oscillator. And that kind of tells you about the strength of the Moog oscillators and what you can do. But it's really, the magic is this patch bay, and also the magic is the fact that we've got this math utility module for Make Noise, which adds like LFOs and more tone. So this feels like when I take a VCA signal from the Mother 32 and I run it into the math module, what happens then is I have the ability to run cycles on 2 cycles here, and I have exponential and logarithmic control of these cycles, and I can do all kinds of cool things with these LFOs. You can do logarithmic, you can do rise, you can do fall, you can do both of them at the same time. And then you have internal patching within this device. This allows me to boost the signal of the Mother and make it sound like a mini Moog. Even though now you can kind of make the Mother 32 can do that by self-patching. I've done different techniques to make it sound like it has 3 oscillators by just using the patch bay. But when you run it into the mass module, it does even more. It makes it even more powerful. And again, this Lifeforms 2x2 mixer, I would suggest if you have a Eurorack and you're like, well, how am I going to get all these signals to control them? Well, if you build a Eurorack, one of the things you need to do, you need something like a math module, which gives you a central kind of CPU kind of control over your sound. And then you also need a mixer module. So the mixer module allows you to take all the voltage controlled amplifiers. Like you see here, there's a VCA on the Mother, there's a VCA on the DFAM. And then there's, outputs, all the outputs on this math module are like where you see here that this is an output. This line right here is the output. There's an output over here too. There's, it's probably buried, but there are 2 outputs of VCAs on the maths. And then you can run that into your Pittsburgh module, and you have a master volume control, and then you've got these volume controls. It allows you to take that mix, and it's cool. Like when we got the 6U, which is the rack root, 6U is what's holding our Eurorack. What's cool about this is when you hook it up, it's like a 2-tiered Eurorack, but also has the ability to, if you look at this thing, it has the ability to also connect to another device like a drum brute, but we have it connected to a Minibrute 2S. And so what that allows us to do is we can take all those Eurorack signals, right, coming off of here, and we put it into the master on the Minibrute 2S. Once that does is it lets us use all the synthesis controls, the subtractive synthesis of this Minibrute 2S. But it also, including the volume control, but it also lets us take a 1/4-inch line of all those VCAs and send that back to our MX1 performance mixer, which takes that monophonic signal and outputs it as stereo into our Zoom R24. And that's how we take our Eurorack and then record it. And doing it this way, instead of using like a computer, the one benefit is you don't get compression of the signal. And what you hear off of my Moogs and my analog equipment is what you get. What you play is what you get. You don't get compression. You don't have to deal with rendering on a PC. If I do all this work to get a sound, which you can see on these synths, it's a lot of work to get the sound manipulated. I don't want a PC to ruin my mix. Now, I know if you get a really good PC, you might not ruin your mix, but I don't have the greatest PC in the world, and PCs you have to update all the time. This way, I can always get what I hear off of these Moogs and my headphone is what comes into here. And I can get a really clean signal. It's all coming in off a 1/4-inch line. And then it goes out to my R24 and I record it. You know, what I hear is what I get. I worked with a musician one time. I was using FL Studio and they'd spend all this time, and that's just an example, on trying to get their effects and everything and applying all this stuff. And then when they went to render, it didn't sound like what they did. And they would get all frustrated and it'd take forever for them to get what they wanted. That is one of the risks of using computer equipment. And also, when I go on the road, this stuff will work unless I drop it. It will always give me what I do, you know, what I put into it. It's never going to crash on me. If I use the R24 instead of a DAW, I can mute and unmute tracks when I go to play. And so if I had a bunch of tracks, up to 24 tracks on this machine, I can suddenly unmute a track and then play live my piano or my Moog. So I have a job interview in 2 minutes. So again, this is the wide view of my studio. Thank you for taking the time to see the ghost. Again, if you check out our SoundCloud, we have a PayPal me link. We are somewhat of a starving artist, even though we have all this stuff. It is the COVID time. Every artist out there on SoundCloud that's been out there and has a pretty good following has that button. We'd appreciate it if you hit the SoundCloud PayPal me link and support us, or even on our Anchor FM channel, hit the support button, or even on our Spotify. If you go to Family Electric Ghost on Spotify, you can hit that button and support us in what we do. We interview indie artists from around the world all on our show on Anchor FM, and we'll be talking to another band this Friday. So we'll talk to you later. Be safe out there, and we'll talk to you later. Family Electric Ghost signing off.